Hi, friends. Welcome to Wednesday Wonderings. This is part 4 in a four-part series. So leave a comment and let me know if this has been an interesting series for you and what you'd like to see in the future. I'm Lynn Cox. I'm the interim senior leader of the Washington Ethical Society in Washington, D.C. And these videos are for all of my subscribers and also for the members of WES so that we can help get to know each other and have another venue for connection and discussion. So today I'd like to talk a little bit more about connection and about mutual care and responsibility. We are seeing kind of another shift in how different places are dealing with COVID. We're seeing that the state of Maryland overall has decided that they're in phase 3, while some of the cities and municipalities in Maryland have stayed in phase 2 because the cases are more severe in those places. Washington, D.C., as for last I heard, is still in phase 2. So there's just a lot of differences in our local metropolitan area about what's going on and what's open and how safe people think they are. And it can be confusing. It's also confusing, I know, for families with school-aged children, wondering, is this the week that distance learning goes to in-person learning? I know several of the local school districts have just decided to stay on distance learning through the fall rather than trying to bounce back and forth. And then there are private schools who are making different decisions, maybe trying to go in person, maybe having a hybrid model. So again, there's a lot of confusion and not a lot of unanimity in how we're handling our risk management. I wonder if part of the difference is in how close we are to people who have been experiencing the virus, how close we are to people who have died. I think that it is harder to manage a risk when we can't see it. It's harder to manage a risk when we don't have personal experience with it. And then, of course, there are other pressures, right? That the availability of support for people who can't go to their jobs has really dwindled. And so it's a matter of survival for some people, whether or not they're able to work. We are facing an eviction crisis because eviction moratoriums have run out, or if they haven't run out, landlords have figured out ways to evict tenants anyway. And even once those moratoriums do run out again, it doesn't say anything about back rent or about support for back rent, and it doesn't say anything about mortgage support for those landlords who don't have another way of paying mortgages on their rental properties. So we really need a big picture solution for what to do to keep people alive and housed and as safe as possible. What any individual one of us can do about that is limited. We can vote, we can write to our legislators, we can be as compassionate as we can in our individual lives. But a lot of this needs to be a collective solution. The places where we do have some leverage are in the institutions, the smaller institutions where we belong. If you are in management in your workplace, or if you're part of a social group or an organization that can decide whether and how to meet, those are the places we have leverage. And so that's definitely true at WES. That at WES we've decided that our Sunday mornings, our online platforms will continue to be online through the end of May. And that saves us from having to buck back and forth to have to make an in-person plan and then rescind it as cases go up and down. It's not a good use of our staff time, and it's not a good use of our volunteer time to be constantly monitoring the numbers to figure out what can we do this week, right? So deciding to just be online for platforms through May means that we can put our energy into making that as engaging as possible, right? Saving our planning energy for the long term so that when we do begin to resume some in-person operations, that we can really plan that the best way we know how, with as much information as we have. Even now in September, we have more information than we had in March. Um, the case numbers are not as different as I would like, but we definitely have more information about what we can do to limit exposure, what we can do to manage our risk. So, platforms online through May. One thing that staff and I are working on right now is a guide for socially distanced outdoor events. So that if your deepening circle or your book group wants to meet outdoors, masked, 6 feet apart, that may be possible. Um, and we'll want to think about what precautions we want to take, because we're not just talking about the risk to the people in that group, right? We're talking about the risk to the society as a whole, to Wes as a whole, and the responsibility that Wes has to make events that are sponsored by Wes as safe as possible under the circumstances. So it's not an individualistic choice. It's a choice about how are we going to do this together. So we're working on outdoor socially distanced small group event guidelines. We're thinking about what it would be like to have an outdoor socially distanced resource pickup kind of event so that people could come in waves to say hello to the outside of the building. And don't forget that there is also the Friday afternoon Black Lives Matter vigil, because that is definitely an event that risk has been taken seriously at, where participants in the vigil do stay distanced, they stay masked, they face the street instead of each other. We're holding signs, we're not doing a lot of shouting. So if you miss the building and you'd like to make your views known that Black Lives Matter, that's still open on Fridays at 5 o'clock in front of the building. The phases after that are to start thinking about what it would take to be as safe as possible for socially distanced, masked indoor events. And I don't know yet what that's going to look like or what the conditions would be for making that possible. But again, I'm not just thinking about this in terms of that draw to be social, which is a very visceral draw, and it's a human need. I'm thinking about this in terms of what is the ethical obligation we have as a community. What is the ethical obligation we have to make sure that we are being inclusive of the most vulnerable? The folks who can't attend in person, either because they are at a distance or because their health is too fragile to risk even a masked outdoor socially distanced event. It is important that we not leave them behind. So in all of our planning and our collective responsibility, we're thinking about how can we continue to be inclusive? How can we continue to make the experience of people who are participating from home as welcoming and as engaging as possible, while also recognizing that we're going to need to slowly move towards being able to do some things in person where it's possible. So I'm thinking about all of that. It's all percolating. I'm consulting the staff. I'm consulting the board members who are on the reopening team. And I'm curious about your thoughts. I know I've been hearing in cottage meetings about what people wish and what people hope and what people miss. So we'll keep talking about that. So let's think more broadly about our collective responsibility. Like, what is our ethical obligation to the whole? And how do we balance that with some things that we might want or need in our individual lives? Not just with COVID, but I know folks have been asking me about earth ethics. We talked a little bit about that last week in this live stream. We're also thinking about what's our responsibility to help people get to the polls, right? What's our responsibility for helping people to understand their rights to vote, if they have it, and how to exercise it? Help people understand what's at stake. Help people make a plan to vote if they're eligible to do that. So there are a number of organizations who are working on that, and there's actually a lot of energy behind that. So no one person has to do everything, but if you want to do something, you can jump in and find your place. UU's for Social Justice is doing postcards to voters. Indivisible is doing postcards to voters. I think Women's March is doing postcards to voters. And then there's the effort of UU the Vote that is doing things like phone banking to voters in states where the right to vote is vulnerable, to help those voters understand what their rights are and how to exercise them. So if you want to look up UU the Vote and get in on their next phone bank, I'm sure they'd be glad to have you. I would be curious more about what's going on in DC, and the thing I know the most about is in Maryland, because we're also thinking about our collective responsibility in Maryland for encouraging our legislators to rise to the occasion. I mentioned the eviction crisis, and so there are groups that are working on asking the Maryland legislature to come back in for a special session to deal with things like the eviction crisis. So if you're a Maryland voter, call your state senator, call your state rep, call whoever you can to try to encourage them to come back to Annapolis. So what else? What else is our collective responsibility? How do we use our gifts together? How do we understand ourselves as part of a larger whole? We're all connected. And the good news about that is that no one person has to do everything. It also means that our choices reverberate. Our choices reverberate and affect people that we may not even know. So we're doing the best we can at all times. And I worry that the pressure of feeling like it is all up to one person or it's all up to us is causing a little bit of frozenness, right? That it's hard to act when it feels like every choice has so many consequences. So I think we need to be willing to make some mistakes, right? We need to be willing to do the best we can and to forgive our neighbors for doing the best they can, forgive ourselves, and try again, right? When it doesn't work out, take stock. Try it again with what you know now. It concerns me how much perfectionism there is in the world. It concerns me how much our responsibility to make the best choices that we can turn into a feeling like there is no forgiveness for making the wrong choice. It concerns me that we feel like we have that much control, right? And that if we can't control the outcome, we might as well give up. And my friends, that is perfectionism talking. This past Sunday at West, there was a panel of speakers at Platform, and one of the speakers spoke about whether the outcome goes the way we want it to or not. Life is worth fighting for. So I'm holding on to that life is worth fighting for, that we need not be able to control things in order to stay in it, in order to stay engaged and reach out to folks and be part of networks, right? Find places where we can be guided by those who are most impacted and do work together, work that doesn't ask us to always be experts, just asks us to be in it, to be part of the solution. I think the other thing that's important is to find joy wherever we can. And for some of us, finding joy is revolutionary because The world does not want us to exist, right? So being able to find joy in the midst of struggle is a form of resistance. It's a form of bringing life into the places that um, would like to support the principalities of death. So I hope that you are finding some joy. I hope that you're finding some places to create, some places to tell somebody that you love them, some places to see that you can make a difference in a small way. I mean, maybe that's bringing somebody in your house a glass of water when they need it, right? The very small scale is part of the bigger picture. It doesn't have to be the all of the picture, right? We don't have to stop at individual actions, but it's part of it. And those are the parts that can help sustain us when we're finding joy in our relationships and in our networks, in creativity, in beauty. And for some of it's finding peace in stillness. Whether stillness for you is a walk in the woods, or it's meditating, or cross stitch, or woodworking, whatever it is. Finding that stillness within that can give us the strength to carry on, right? So I hope you're finding that this week too. In fact, before we wrap up, why don't we have a meditation? So find a comfortable place to be. Well, you know your body. You know what's going to be a place where you're stable and comfortable, but also alert and aware of what's going on around you and within you. And take a nourishing breath. Take a breath that nourishes your body. Take another breath that nourishes your body. What does that feel like? As you breathe, notice what it feels like when the air enters your body. Notice what it's like to hold it there. And how does it feel in your body when you let it go? Let's call to mind and heart the activities that nourish you as you take in that breath. Call to mind and heart the people who've nourished you, those who are still among us, those perhaps some who have passed on. Who are the people who have nourished you? Next, as we take a breath and hold that breath just for a moment, as you're holding, imagine the things that are within you. What are the gifts within you to share? What are the struggles within you that call you forward? What's the love in you asking you to do? So breathe in that nourishing breath and hold and let it go. What's within you? Next, what are you releasing? What are you putting out into the world? What are your aspirations? What are the actions that you're taking? And how are you sharing love and care? What are you letting go of? How are you putting perfectionism in its context instead of letting it drive what's going on? How are you releasing perfectionism? How can we release a sense of control so that we can do the next right thing in this moment. And let's take one more nourishing breath and remember that people, you, me, our neighbors, people are ends in themselves. Our worth is not defined by what we do. Our worth is not defined by what we can produce. People are ends in themselves. You are important. The community is important. We are important. So please embrace your worth in one more nourishing breath. It's good to be together, friends. Thank you for joining me for this 4-part series. I'm going to talk to some of you and see what would be a good use of YouTube in the future. And that might mean uploaded videos instead of live videos. That might mean using another venue, but we'll see. I'm still looking for ways that we can connect and we can discuss and we can be together. But thanks for joining me. Take care.